Hi everybody, welcome back to Indycar. Earlier on I was trying a little experiment with my camera. Didn't work out, unfortunately I ended up upside down. So I'm going to repeat this show today for you because I was trying to make some important points and they got lost because the whole video was inverted. So to go through this again, I've been asked by many people what the situation is about Scottish sovereignty. Sovereignty determines who it is that decides who rules a country. Now, in Scotland's case, many years ago, I was talking about going back to the 14th century, 1320 in actual fact, the Declaration of Arbroath. Now, many people have heard of this document. It's a bit like the Magna Carta in terms of significance. What that document does is it declares the country of Scotland exists, and it also declares that its people are the sovereign arbiters. They're the people who decide who rules them. And because of this, the way the declaration is written, that the people of Scotland reserve the right, if their leaders or leader is not ruling the country according to the way it's been agreed. In other words, he's not protecting or she's not protecting the interests of the country, not looking after the people and their welfare, then the sovereign people of Scotland reserve the right to remove that ruler via a democratic vote, in our case, and to replace them with somebody who'll do the job properly. Now that's a very fundamental basis to build a country on. That's the first human right, if you like, written down in the Constitution. Scots have the right to remove their ruler. Their ruler is not chosen for them by Westminster. They're not ruled over by the King. The King's power is not absolute. The ruler of Scotland can be changed by the will of the people. Now this is a very unusual situation for a monarchy. Almost unique at the time in the Middle Ages and the medieval period for a country to be able to remove its own ruler like that just by will of the people. So that's the first thing. That established that the people of Scotland, in Scottish law and in terms of international law, it was agreed that we are sovereign. So that's the first point. That means that Westminster does not hold sway over us. Neither does the Queen or any of her heirs. Neither does the Scottish Parliament hold any sway over us either. We, as voters, have the right to remove the Queen if we wish. The Queen is actually the Queen of Scots. She is Elizabeth I, Queen of Scots. She's not Queen of Scotland, and she's not Elizabeth II, because there's only ever been one Elizabeth, Queen of Scots, and she is it. And even now, we could vote to remove the Queen if we wanted to, right? If we wanted to do that. Nobody's really saying that we should. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we do have the ability to democratically completely change the Constitution of Scotland. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, if the country votes democratically to change its rule so that Scotland is ruling itself, so that the people appoint or vote for their representatives to sit in Edinburgh rather than London, and we say we want no more London rule, we want to be ruled here. We're not happy with the people who are ruling us from London. They're not doing a good job, they're not looking after our welfare, and we reserve the right to get rid of them. By voting yes in a referendum, even if the referendum is not binding, does not make any difference to the legality of the vote, because if 2 million people said yes in a ballot which was conducted according to the rules and was only advisory, it wasn't binding, then we would still become independent, simply because of the Declaration of Arbroath. It established the fact that we are allowed to do that. And because we are allowed to do that by democratic vote, the rest of the world, the international community, would need to respect that, because the people would have spoken democratically. Whether the government in London huffed and puffed about it not giving permission and it not being an official vote would make no difference. We're not Catalonia, we're not in the same situation. Scotland is an established country, it always has been. All the way through the Union, Scotland has remained a separate kingdom. It's a part of the UK, but it is not it's not been destroyed by the Act of Union. It's not been extinguished at all. It has simply been joined. That's what a union is. If Scotland had been subsumed and it had been destroyed as a place and its identity removed, there would be no Scotland. There would be nothing for us to secede with. We wouldn't be a country. And the fact that we are a country and that we can secede establishes that legally. So anything else is just nonsense. The other question I get asked a lot is, after we leave the UK, assume that we leave the UK before we Brexit, are we still in the EU or are we out? Well, the answer to that question is we're out. And it's quite categorical, because when a country of the EU, which the UK would still be, if one part of that secedes away from the UK and becomes a separate state, it becomes a new country. And because it's a new country, it is viewed as a new country. It's viewed as a third party by the European Union, and we would need to reapply. Interestingly, the remaining England and Wales part of the UK, and Northern Ireland as well, I should say, those would still remain. Those would remain as a different country as well, and they would need to reapply too, because they would be a new entity. They wouldn't be the same either. And although they're a continuation of the UK, they would also be out of the EU, even if Brexit wasn't happening. That's the weird thing about this. The law is very strange on this, but it appears from what I've read that Scotland would be out of the EU, and England, Wales and Northern Ireland would be as well, at least temporarily, until they could negotiate a new deal. So there isn't, it appears, any particular benefit to us leaving the UK before Brexit, during Brexit or after Brexit. It doesn't seem to make any difference at all when we do it, so long as we do it. That's the main thing. And this might explain why the SNP government has not seemed in such a hurry to call a referendum. They probably know, because most of their politicians have law degrees, that they don't need to rush this, because it won't make any difference to our European Union membership at all. We'll still be out of the EU no matter what we do. So leaving England now won't make any difference to us at all, and we might as well leave later when we know more about Brexit. So that kind of makes more sense in my mind now that I know this fact. It seems to make sense of why the SNP is not enthusiastically saying we must have, Indy Ref 2 at this particular date. They don't need to. They're not in a hurry to do it, because there is no benefit to leaving before Brexit. I'd always assumed it would be, and I was wrong. And I'm quite happy to say I was wrong today. I did some thorough research on this through the Law Society, and I was totally wrong. Scotland will be out of the EU once we leave England, once we leave the UK. All right, well, that's kind of good news, bad news. It's not really good news or bad news. As far as I'm concerned, it's information, and it now makes sense of the situation a bit more. There is some good news, though, and the good news is regarding two different forms of pro-independence media. The first one is Independence Live. You'll know them from covering various indie events all over the UK, and from their evening show, The Big Night In, done by David McGowran. Anyway, Kevin Gibney, who is the technical expert at Independence Live, when I was doing my evening pilot show with them, I realised that they were having trouble with some of the equipment, because they have to keep taking it down and putting it back up every evening, because they can only use the studio after business hours, because it is on loan from another company who are very generously donating the space. But they really need a permanent home, and Independence Live really needs a permanent studio where the lights, the camera equipment, the microphones, the mixers and everything can be all preset and left. And that will get rid of all the glitches and the jumpiness and the mistakes that sometimes happen technically, if they could have a permanent studio. Chris O'Kane, who was my guest on the show, on the pilot show that I did recently, Chris and I know of a venue nearby, actually, in Govan, which is empty at the moment, which was a sound studio, which comes in two parts. It has a studio for rehearsing and whatever you're doing for performances, and there's a glass booth as well. Sorry, it's just a phone call coming in. There's a glass booth office as well, which is used as the control room for the sound the sound engineer, and in our case it would be the video engineer, sound engineer as well, and perhaps the editor or the producer. It's a perfect place for a small video company to set up a permanent studio, and it is vacant at the moment. And I know that this morning a friend of mine who is a caretaker of this building was showing around another small video company, and I spoke directly with the firm's director, and I said, would you be prepared to share this studio with another small video production company? He said, oh yeah, that would be great. So it looks as if, as long as the price is right, that Independence Live and this other small video outfit could share the facilities, half the bills, and also use each other's equipment. I think it would be a win-win for everybody. So if this pans out in reality and it actually works, then you should be able to see a big improvement in the quality and the consistency of Independence Live's studio shows, without so many mistakes, without so many microphone issues, and without the echo that we got from the old studio. So that's the first piece of good media news for this week. The second piece is that friends of mine are making investigations in the Irish Republic at the moment to obtain airtime on a free sat channel which transmits from the Republic over the border into Northern Ireland at the moment, but could quite easily transmit pro-independent Scottish programming content on the same platform into central Scotland. In fact, beyond. With satellite coverage, we could cover the whole of Scotland with this. So we're looking at that at the moment to see if the platform providers of this free sat channel in the Republic would be prepared to give us some airtime on their system, and that would allow us to broadcast shows like Indycar, Independence Live, Big Night In, and all of the coverage of independence events across Scotland, which Independence Live already do. To have them put on a proper television platform that can be beamed directly into people's TV sets at home would be a first for the independence movement, and it does look like it might be possible. At the moment, we're just at the point where we're investigating the possibilities, and I have a friend who has good contacts there making some investigations for us just now. If it comes off, I will let you know, and if it comes off, it means that Indycar might be going out more regularly on TV at night time into people's living rooms, and it also means that other shows that we are going to produce will become more numerous. They'll be better quality because we'll have a studio in Govan which is permanent, and we might have a broadcaster who can put that kind of programming directly into people's living rooms. And that is what we need. We need a medium which can fight against the mainstream on their own turf. And at the moment, we are just nibbling away around the edges. We're harrying them, but we're not really hitting them where it hurts yet. Anyway, I'll let you know how that goes, but we are trying at the moment to make this happen. And to me, the battle for independence is going to be won on television and social media. I don't think the newspapers will have much effect. Newspapers are a dwindling source of news nowadays, and they mostly are read by older people. I'm not saying older people are bad, but older people prefer newspapers. It's as simple as that. They're not so keen sometimes to sit with a laptop. They would much rather just go and buy a paper and read it. There's nothing wrong with that, but the numbers are dwindling, and I think we need to carry the message by television into people's living rooms. And if we do that, then we'll convert people. When they start to see independence programs live on their televisions, they'll begin to realise that it's going to happen, that it's not some fringe interest group that's nothing to do with them. And we will get right into the heart of their living rooms. We will talk to them directly and explain why independence is not only a life choice, it's now a necessity. Otherwise, they're going to be fracked. Otherwise, they're going to have every nuclear submarine in the UK pumping radioactive tritium into the lochs on the west coast of Scotland. They're going to be dumping nuclear waste probably in Scotland as well before long. The Tories have got all sorts of nasty plans for Scotland. They're going to try and bleed us dry and dump as much toxic garbage here as possible. And I for one am not going to let them do it anymore. It's high time actually that we kicked them out. We kicked Trident out. We kicked all the the waste and the rubbish that they dump here out of Scotland as well. And I'd love to be able to see these sorts of things on a television show in somebody's living room one evening. That's the dream come true for independence programming, I think. Anyway, I'm off. For the meantime, keep watching on YouTube and watching on Facebook, and I think sometimes you'll see me on Twitter as well. But always have a look for me on these platforms. I appear on Twitter a lot more now as well, but YouTube carries Indycar every single day. I'll see you later. Have a good day. Bye.